this episode of the Business Communicators.
And we struggle knowing who we are, what we value, and what we believe. We struggle knowing each other. And I've just come to believe that data and information inform, but questions and stories transform.
You're listening to the Business Communicators. And now your hosts, Austin Stenton, Hattie Horn, and Thomas Bain.
Welcome to Season 4, Episode 19 of the Business Communicators, the number one podcast in the world for communications and marketing professionals. My name's Austin Stenton, joined alongside my co-host, Hattie Horn, Thomas Bain, on this journey as we explore the world of communications and discuss the key issues and trends that impact our industry. And we'll be joined here shortly by David York, author of the new book, The Gift of Lift, Harnessing the Power of Stewardship to Elevate the World. I think it's going to be a fun conversation. But before we bring David onto the show, Hattie, it's been a bit since we've had you on the show. Thomas and I have been kind of flying solo a little bit. We had a summer break. How have you been? I miss you.
I've been good. I left y'all on y'all own for a minute, and I'm like,
we struggled as a result.
But we didn't burn down the house either. So,
I know, but I'm excited, guys. I gotta tell you about this. I just got my Scrum Master certification.
Nice.
So I am so excited about that. Woo, 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 woo.
You know, I actually knew that, and here's why. For some reason on LinkedIn, anytime you post, I get a push notification on my phone. And
That's right.
But you're the only person that it does that for. And I think it's because you tagged me in a post or something like that, or mentioned the Business Communicators, that I read it and I'm like, oh, that's good news. And I like it. And then I don't know. I think it's fun.
Yes.
So, Thomas, how's it going for you?
it's going. Dog days of summer. Lots of news coming out from different organizations, things like that. So good times. Congratulations, Hattie, by the way.
Thank you. Now I can go on vacation.
Yeah, do something to escape the weather here in Houston.
Oh,
I was actually in Calgary last week, and I thought it was hilarious. It was 67 degrees, and I got a push notification on my phone saying there was a heat warning. And I was like, oh, that's cute. But I know when I'm back up there in October and it's 20 degrees, snow on the ground, I'm going to be the one complaining. So fun times.
Good times.
We'll get into more of the banter and conversation here in a bit, but we just want to remind you to follow us on all of our social media platforms. Just search @BizCommunicator on every platform. TikTok, you can see Hattie and Thomas doing some dances there. And then you can also visit our website, thebusinesscommunicators.com. But let's go ahead and bring in our guest for this week's show. And joining us now on the Business Communicators is David York, who has turned over 25 years of insights and understanding into tools, resources, and processes to help people put words to their why so they can bring purpose to their plans. And I love that. Hattie, we've talked about purpose-driven leadership, and I think David kind of embodies that. And one thing that I found interesting is his mantra is imagining a world filled with people whose first question isn't what's in it for me, but rather what's in it for we. So let's go ahead and bring him on. David York, thank you so much for joining us on the Business Communicators this week.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to chatting with you all.
Let's start first with, kind of that what's in it for we, what's in it for me. I think right now society is so divided. I can't think of a time in my lifetime that society has been so divided on key issues, whether it's social issues, whether it's political, economic. It just seems insane. But at the same time, I fully agree that we should look out for each other, that we should, do what's in the best interest of society, right, to move us forward. But at the same time, I think when it comes to communications professionals in the job market, I think that sometimes it's okay to be selfish, right? It's okay to do things that are best for you, that are best for your family, because at the end of the day, that's your world, that's your we. So I'm kind of curious where you stand on that and kind of what you mean by what's in it for we.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think it's a great question to ask. And I think so often we kind of we pendulum swing in society and culture, right? And we pick these either or paradigms when it's really both and. And I think we tend to think, well, do I need to live a life for myself and watch out for myself, or do I need to be totally focused and other centered and not think about myself at all? And I think sometimes we get into these paradigms that we have to pick one or the other. And I just don't think that that's the case. Honestly, in my experience, what I have found is that the most content, most meaning-driven, purpose-driven, intentional, and ultimately happiest people in the world are people who are fully invested, but it's in something bigger than themselves. That doesn't mean that they don't exist, they're not a part, but when we're about something bigger, counterintuitively, that does make us smaller, but it also makes some of our problems and our issues and our struggles smaller as well. It's interesting. They in the 1960s, as we started to send people up into space, astronauts started talking about what's become known as the overview effect. And it's this experience that occurs when astronauts go up into space and they actually see the whole planet. You know what they don't see? They don't see borders. They don't see boundaries. They see something that's big and massive. It makes them feel very, very small. And yet at the same time, it gives them a huge sense of peace in life. We've got these little electric scooters with our kids. We go around on scooters. And we're going on this really rough path. And bouncing around, and I'm looking down, and I'm starting to get a little disoriented because I'm just, seeing the road in front of me and it's bouncy. What I did is I looked up to the horizon. I looked up to what's far ahead of me and above me, and actually it wasn't bouncing around. It was steady. And I think the same is true with life. I think it's so easy to just get tossed and turned around by the events of the day, and we feel like we need to pick a side, pick an angle, and we just kind of get pushed around. But when we have that sense of something that's greater, something that's bigger, it actually brings a lot of peace, contentment, and direction. So I think the answer is yes. We need to both not lose ourselves, but realize that contentment actually comes when there are things that are bigger than ourselves.
I don't want to speak for everyone, but the James Webb photos that came out, you mentioned space, that came out, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, at the time you're listening to this episode, were incredible. I mean, it just really puts into perspective how truly small we are, right? And if you look at, the images, they were incredible. I mean, what we're looking at might not even exist anymore. I mean, that's what to me is incredible. I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there. Thomas, I see you.
Yeah, you were saying about the perspective, looking down close to where you are and the bouncing that you have, looking out ahead, and you don't see it bouncing as much. I was at a conference last week, 2 weeks ago, and I was talking to, I'd say, someone in their mid-career. And she was going from basically working every day to manager level, but then also she volunteered because she had some pet projects that she was very passionate about. And I could tell she was conflicted because she was moving into more of a board position or a director position. And I had to sit down and tell her, I'm like, you have to look at it this way. While when you're doing it hands-on, you're helping with one person. Now that you're running a committee or the board, you're helping a whole lot more people. And so my question really comes into it. How do we help clarify, to get people to look up, to understand the bigger picture, especially as watch the news and the world's going to end tomorrow mentality?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think a lot of this comes from just a lack of clarity that we have. We wrote a book a couple of years ago called Entrusted, and in there we looked at families that successfully transfer wealth. It's kind of a positive psychology because we see so many failed wealth transfers and addicted kids and destroyed inheritances. But what were the characteristics of families that successfully transfer wealth? And I found the same through line between that and people who run the most successful businesses, those who create the most transformation in community. And it's the same thing. They know who they are, what they value, and what they believe. They have a sense of clarity and understanding of those things. And when they understand that, it lets it drive everything else. I think too often we don't have that internal sense of understanding of that core identity of who we are and what are those core values that drive us. And so what happens is we tend to be driven by expectations, right? We live in what I call an if-then paradigm for life. Well, if I do this, then this will happen. If I get this job, then I'll be content. If I can earn some more money, then I won't be stressed. But the people who really make the biggest difference, they live what I call a because therefore model. Because I have these values, because I have this understanding of who I am, therefore this is how I'll act. And it's a very different mindset. It's infinitely more relational, it's more intentional. And it's that because or that transcendence leads to deep engagement. So these are people who are all in. But because it's about something more than themselves, they're not tossed around when expectations aren't met or they're not satisfied in how something turned out, because they're driven by something else.
I guess my question to you is to help me understand what you mean by 4 pillars of a happy culture and how a steward mindship can strengthen that. Because from a reality in my world, there's clear a have and a have not. And so not a lot of people in my world could transfer wealth. They're trying to work on building wealth so that they can transfer it or leave a legacy and things like that. So what are some of the things that you would offer in terms of insights or guidance that would help someone move in that direction?
Yeah, I think it's a great question and it's a great point. And I think that's one of the things, again, I'll admit I started with this mentality. I started as an attorney and a CPA, two of literally the most boring people in the world wrapped into one, right? And when I thought of wealth, I thought about money. And I think that's a very, especially in our culture today, that's what we equate to. But the reality is, when you think about it and you look at a term like legacy, I think another word to use for legacy is impact. And the reality is we all make an impact. We all leave a legacy. I was talking with someone just the other day about a teacher that I had in 8th grade, an experience I had with her. She's a tough, demanding lady. I was not good in school, but I did well in her class. And I'll never forget, she gave me a note once. And in that note, she gave it to the principal's office. They called me to the principal's office. I knew where the principal's office was because I'd been there many times, never for good reason. But when I got there, there was this note from her. And in there, it just said how proud she was of me, that she saw my hard work and effort. And I'll tell you, it was a transformative experience. I had never actually heard a positive comment from a teacher in my life. That lady left a legacy and an impact on me. Almost 40 years later, I still remember her and her belief in me. She didn't have a lot of money. She was a school teacher, middle school teacher. But she has a legacy in how I live my life today. And so I think as we think about those things, we think about terms like legacy and impact. I think it's important to not discount, well, I need to have a certain amount of money, or I need to be in a certain position at a job. I need to have a certain level of influence before I can make an impact. Because I think each of us could probably go back to people who may not fit in any of those categories, and yet were incredibly impactful in our lives.
When things happen in life, we might not understand it at the exact time. There might be a financial loss to it, could be heartbreak brought to it. But sometimes, positive and new things happen and you don't understand the impact that it's going to have in the long run. I mean, I think back in my career, when I started in college, I wanted to go into, international affairs, work in politics, or, go down the legal path. And then I, saw a fraternity brother on the sideline at a football game. And I wondered, how do I get paid to be down there and work? And it turned out it was an athletic communications job. And, I was able to learn about communications. And my boss at the time was Heath Nielsen. And, incredible guy, gave me an opportunity, absolutely fell in love with it. And, I had the writing background, the personality to kind of transition into comms. And here I am, 10, 15 years later, still working in comms. And so it's been an incredible journey, to pinpoint that moment. And as I kind of understand from your background, you have kind of a similar moment in your career, right? You've got the legal and the financial background, but I guess you had a conversation with, was it the Miller family with the Utah Jazz, that maybe kind of changed your career path?
Yeah, it really did. About 6 years ago, I was working with Gail Miller, who's the owner of the Utah Jazz, and she was working on a trust designed to keep the Jazz in the state of Utah. As you guys may or may not know, Utah, we're a one-horse state. We have one professional sports team. It's actually a fairly big rallying point for the community because we've got different religious backgrounds, personal backgrounds. We've got two colleges that love to dislike each other, but the Jazz is kind of
about Utah State.
Yeah, that's right. The Aggies. They're the blue and white I'm willing to root for. But, it is a commonality and common theme. And so we were working on a trust designed to make sure that it stayed here in the state. And in the midst of talking about this, I just kind of mentioned to her offhand, I said, so how will it feel to no longer own the Jazz? And she kind of looked up at me and she said, well, I don't own the Jazz. And I kind of froze for a moment because, Gail's one of the smartest, sharpest, most generous people I've ever met. She's kind of my role model in life. And, but here I am, the attorney and CPA, and I said, well, no, actually, you do own the Jazz. And I'll never forget, she stopped what she was doing and she looked at me and she said, no, I'm a steward of the Jazz. And it was one of the most powerful professional moments I've ever had because here was someone who actually transcended ownership. I've always thought and been raised and believe that ownership's the pinnacle, right? Whoever's the owner, that's the woman or the man that's in charge and in control. But she had found something beyond that. And one of the things that I've seen over my professional practice is that if we're not careful, everything that we own, whether it's our possessions, our properties, our positions, ultimately they own us back if we're not careful. And what we think we own actually own us back. And yet here she was so free of that when actually that would be a status symbol for the vast majority of Americans, the last thing we would give up. But she was about something more. She was about the community. And she was about positively impacting the state. And so for her, whatever advanced that, her because led to that therefore. And so it was fundamentally different. It kind of set me on this motion of, okay, what are the characteristics of these few rare people among us who live with a steward mentality?
Sounds a lot like Gail Benson, the owner of the Saints as well. Very focused on the community and kind of, leaving a legacy instead of just Super Bowl wins.
Exactly.
So we're talking business, but then how do we pass that mentality on to our employees, our kids, our friends and family, I guess, for the next statement is once we identify, hey, what I'm doing is a small part, how do we ensure that they're doing the same to maintain that legacy?
Yeah. And what I always say is that purpose and people should always drive process and planning, right? And so I think it's a matter of a couple of things. One is, again, just being really clear. One of the conundrums in life, and I think it's true, we talk about how you can do anything in life. Well, one thing I've come to learn is you can't do everything. And so people who make the most impact, they're really clear in what matters to them, and they use that as they invest their time, their talent, their treasure in that. Roy Disney once said, it's pretty easy to make decisions once you know what you value. And so I think they have a clarity that allows them into that decision making. And then they're always about the other person. They know that others are the key. And I think that when our outer world drives what we do, it leads to a lot of inner confusion. But when we're clear on who we are inside, it actually allows us to invest in other people, to help build them up, because what we're trying to do is advance the ball. I was in Strasbourg, France last year, and there they have a cathedral It was the tallest building in the world from about 1650 to late 1800s. It took 160 years to build. And it was started by a gentleman who then had his son take it over, and then his grandson, and then another gentleman who actually finished it. But it's an incredible structure. But the reality is, if he had set out to build what he could build, it would be a lot smaller and it would be a lot less impactful. But he took on something that was bigger than himself. I think of Dr. Martin Luther King. He took on something that was far bigger than himself. Unfortunately, he was not able to see everything that he realized, but we're still benefiting from his vision and his direction today. And so I think sometimes it is about taking on something bigger than yourself, but that naturally gravitates to a need to encourage and inspire others and make something bigger than yourself.
It's not only what you say, it's what you see. Because as children, and as we model ourselves and as we expose others to this particular philosophy, mindset of impact, because everyone's not exposed to that. They're not always having these types of conversations. And as you start one person at a time, from the smallest to the largest, would you think, how do you help people get to that part? Because again, everybody's not going to know or understand. And this is a big, wide world. You've got yourself as one person, you have the three of us as one person. And I always believe that the more you're exposed to people who are doing these things, or you're seeing these things as they happen, you're able to really, they can resonate from it. But it's unfortunate that they're not able to always be exposed to this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, Austin, you had mentioned earlier that we live in such a world of division, and I don't disagree with that. But honestly, when we can combine forces, we switch from division to multiplication, and I do think the reality is 2 or 3 or 4 of us can actually do 5 or 10 or 20 times the amount of work and impact, because we all are unique and different. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the demotivator posters. They're the spin on the motivational.
Yes.
One of my very favorite ones is a picture of a snowflake, and it says, "Just like a snowflake, you're unique, just like everybody else." But I think there's actually a lot of truth to that, right? We all are unique. That's part of what makes us the same. But the reality is, we can create such leverage and such impact when we come together. And I talk about this from a value standpoint. So, for example, if I were to take 2 values like justice and mercy, and I were to ask you guys, would you rather live in a world of justice and no mercy, or in a world of mercy and no justice? The reality is, neither one of those sound very compelling to me, and I see the problems with each. We tend to think that justice and mercy compete with each other. They actually complete each other. And I think, just like for each of us, the 3 of you are probably more than 3 times better than you are individually. And it's because you come with different skill sets and abilities, backgrounds, experiences. And so I actually think there's a multiplicative effect when we work together, and we actually can complete each other in a way that it's not competition. I have a friend of mine who talks about competition, and he talks about not with competing with each other, but completing each other, and how competition actually is intended and designed to bring out the best in everyone. And so, I'm just a huge fan in having clarity of purpose, but then really building culture that is inclusive and diverse. That's where we can actually create the greatest strengths when we do that.
I definitely agree. And I think we've spoken about this several times on the podcast that, there is a lot of discontent and mistrust in our society today. But a lot of the problem comes down to people being afraid to have a conversation with someone they disagree with. And, we've encouraged people that if you have a different viewpoint, like, that's okay. Like, actually take the time to listen and learn from somebody. Use your communication skills to learn, to grow. You don't necessarily have to agree on everything, right? And that's okay. But if you come to a place of understanding on why Thomas believes something that he does, or why Hattie believes something that he does, or David, why you believe something that you do, I think that really, kind of gets to the point of what you're trying to communicate, which is what's in it for we, so you can collaborate and work together.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I actually think, we live in the information age where we have access to literally every piece of human information we've ever gathered. And we struggle knowing who we are, what we value, and what we believe. We struggle knowing each other. And I've just come to believe that data and information inform, but questions and stories transform. And I think we need to try to get out of the information business and get into the transformation business. And it starts exactly with what you said, Austin. That's questions. And the thing that I think is so powerful about a question is that it has two of the biggest building blocks of relationship, which are humility and respect. I mean, when I ask you a question, and Hattie, if I were to ask you a question, what I'm coming to you, I'm ultimately saying is, I lack something that I think you possess. Would you be willing to share that with me? It's inherently respectful. It's inherently humble. And it creates an opportunity to create relationship. And so, that's, I like to get on Twitter. We all like to get on Twitter. That Twitter is all about people sharing their opinions. It's not about asking questions. And I think so often we want to be the smartest person in the room. We want to have the zinger that answers it. When really, I don't think we need answers. I think we need questions.
Ask the tough questions. I think that's something incredibly important, and know that it's okay to ask questions. If you don't know something, ask. That's what helps us have a better understanding of life and how we operate. And David, I do want to close real quick with your new book. It came out in June, The Gift of Lift, Harnessing the Power of Stewardship to Elevate the World. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about your book and maybe how they can find it, how they can kind of keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah. So, after that experience with Gail, that really just caused me to pause. I've spent the last 6 years really thinking about, okay, what is a steward? What does it look like? What are the characteristics of stewardship? What happens when it's lacking? And then how do you build and foster stewardship? So, the book, The Gift of Lift, is really my summation of that 6 years of thinking, reading, researching, that concept. So it's on Amazon. It's now just on Audible for people who are listeners more than readers, which actually includes me. So you can go on to those sources. I also have at davidryork.com. I've got a TED Talk on wealth, what wealth really is. It kind of goes into what we talked about earlier, that it's so much more than money. So there's a number of different resources there as well.
We'll definitely link to all of that in the show notes below. And when you're on Amazon, looking for the book, just look over David's left shoulder and look for that image, and check out the book. But David York, we really appreciate you for joining us on the Business Communicators podcast this week. I think it's been a really insightful conversation. We encourage our subscribers to connect with you to purchase the book. And again, just scroll down the show notes below and take it from there. So David, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for the time.
Well, that was a fun conversation. I enjoyed it. Very, very insightful. I wish we could have gone on for a little bit longer, but we all have hard stops here. corporate jobs. So we do what we can while we
things to do.
So if you're enjoying our conversations, please sponsor so we can spend more time and not always have to run back to our corporate jobs.
Well, I'm betting on the lottery on that one. It's over $600 million.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's split it. Let's get a huge studio. Let's do this daily.
I'll give you some.
We'll travel the world and do it daily. How about that?
Mm-hmm. That'll work.
Well, definitely, thanks to you, David York, for joining us on the podcast. And again, if you want to follow his work and pick up his new book, we encourage you to do so. Just scroll down in the show notes below. All of his information will be there. But really good conversation. And I really liked his perspective. Probably going to actually reach out to him and see if he wants to join us on Cautious Coffee, because I think D-Ray would really, enjoy chatting with him. But yeah, good stuff. And Thomas, Hattie, I know that we've kind of, taken the last month or so, sort of as a summer vacation. We can't podcast every week. We got to take time for ourselves at times. But let's go a little bit deeper. I mean, Thomas, you've got some big news. Can you share anything, or
not yet? This time?
Not yet. Okay, maybe next episode. But
maybe.
What's been going on the last few weeks that's kind of stood out for you guys in the comms space? I mean, obviously we've seen the Elon Musk situation and that whole debacle, if you will.
Oh, following the news has definitely been interesting. Whether it's the Ukraine-Russia stupidity, and just trying to keep up with what's going on over there, the January 6th thing. But I think what stuck out to me was an article that I shared with y'all recently was CEOs need to be better communicators, and all of us being in professional organizations, I always remember that it was the conversation: how do we get communicators into the C-suite? How do we get communicators in the C-suite? Because they were always coming from either the operations or the finance background. And then to see this article on Axios, I was like, maybe they're finally starting to listen to the Business Communicator, the #1 podcast for business communications.
Well, I think it's stuff that, the Edelman Trust Barometer tells us, right? People want their CEOs to be able to communicate on, issues that are impacting culture, community, whether it's like ESG, whether it's, social justice issues. They want their executives to be able to comment on that. And so that's forcing businesses to understand, like, we need someone in power that, can have trust with not only, the stakeholders, the investment firms, but also the employees. And I think
they want people want transparency, but the sad part for me is we keep seeing these articles about what CEOs should be doing, and we think that communicators should be able to want to help. But the way I look at it is anybody actually listening to what we're telling them? And I'm not talking about us as the business communicators, but as communications profession. Communications profession has always been looked at as a support, not so much as, because that people don't look at it as a bottom line.
Well, they'll look at it as a cost center.
Yes. So with that, those business CEOs who do respect the profession and will actually listen and things like that, that's really great. But if you look at all the things, and when you talk about CEOs to communicate, you think about, remember Elon Musk talking to his folks about coming into the office, you have to be here 40 hours a week. Poor judgment. Then you've got other CEOs laying people off in a Zoom call. What is wrong with you? So it speaks to the fact that there's a gap, and there's something's really wrong here.
I think it's again having that conversation, understanding your culture, the people that work for you. What do they want? Do you trust the people to do their jobs? I can say, I started a new job recently. I don't know that we've talked about that on the podcast. I know both of you knew that, but I left the communications agency and now doing media relations for an energy company. And when I started my last job at the agency, like, I knew a lot of the people going into it, right? And so when it was working from home due to COVID, I had pre-existing relationships with a lot of them, so I felt the transition was, fairly easy. At this company, there's a handful of people that I know, but it's 10,000 plus employees spanning multiple countries, and so building that internal network going on, especially when you have like an external facing role, that's difficult to do just from working from home. Like, I do think you need that FaceTime. And, I was fortunate that my second week there, I spent a week up in, Canada, and, was able to meet a lot of people, met a lot of people here in Houston. So we're still hybrid, 3 days.
In some cases, why the thing for me is people need to listen to their advisors. CEOs should listen to their advisors. And I don't get the impression that they are. And that's going back to better communications. If you're in the C-suite and you've hired professionals to advise you on how to communicate, you would think they would listen to some degree.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here because there has been rumor, speculation. I mean, granted, you got to take Reddit and some of the message boards as, a grain of salt.
With a grain of salt.
Yeah. But specifically in the engineering space, with the tech companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, there have been a lot of reports that some of these like design engineers, they can get a lot of their work done in 10 to 12 hours for the week. And so what they've been doing is finding another full-time job. And so for them, they're working at, say, Google and Amazon and racking in massive, massive benefits, which is good for them. Like individualistic, it's good for them, their family, they're setting themselves up financially. But at the same time, when you have someone, say, working at Tesla and they're splitting perceivably half of their time with Google, I can kind of understand that from and again, I don't know that this is happening. I'm just speculating.
I don't either, but again, it's not what you communicate, it's the way you do it. It's the approach.
Correct. And we were talking about what's in it for we versus what's in it for me. I applaud them for the hustle and for being able to get their jobs done. But at the same token, how's that going to affect the next generation of the employees? This is why you can't work from home, because we think we're giving you enough work for 40 hours, but we're really giving you enough work for 10 hours. And then when we do give you more work, you're like, I don't have any time.
Well, to me, it's not about the time. To me, it's like I said, when you're communicating and it gets out to the public and you see how it was translated in the public, y'all are talking about behind the scenes things that I know nothing about, whether this person's doing this job or that job. It's that he communicated, I need you to be doing 40 hours, but he didn't get into why. But the public saw it as, what's wrong with him?
I 100% agree with what you're saying, Hattie. What I'm saying is for the individuals who stand up, because I've been at companies where 40 hours was the amount of work was there, and then I've been at other companies where it's like, oh, I got to be here for 40 hours. My concern
it's the optics for me.
100% agree. But what I'm saying is all these people who are really, really good at their job, should they be going to these employers saying, hey, I want to do a part-time gig with you to be respectful of your money, your time, give me part benefits or whatever? Because I'm fearful that down the road, as more stories come out of people doing side hustles or three hustles or four hustles.
Don't some companies make their people sign some sort of contracts where they can't do that? Apparently, Tesla doesn't do that.
That doesn't mean people are abiding by it.
Yeah,
I got you.
And a lot of those contracts are also as long as it doesn't affect your work performance. So if you're only given 10 hours worth of work, that's on the company. But if the company doesn't know, but then also a lot of those are, you can't consult or work on competing projects. So if they consult for well,
there's so much more to the story than I am. Than my little brain did not even know, because y'all are telling me things I didn't know. And so with that, okay, now I can understand why he communicated that. But again, when I first saw the message, I'm like,
that's the thing, Hattie. Like, context matters, right? This is an internal memo. We don't know if there were other memos that were sent out.
We don't know what was leaked. We don't know what the real. But the public only saw it as someone who was punishing people for not for working remotely and not for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So, and in a world where employees have been able to demand or even get a job where they can work remotely and be productive, that message that came out did not say anything about not being productive. It just said you just needed to come to work.
Right. Yeah.
So,
it's going to be interesting to follow, because we all assumed that work from home hybrid schedule was going to be kind of the wave of the future. But I think companies are maybe kind of rethinking that right now. And so I do think it's going to be interesting to see how the workforce responds to that.
Also, too, it's going to don't you think it also is going to force companies to do a better job of, they were kind of more hands off. they don't micromanage. They assume people are getting things done, but there's got to be something internally that is showing that these people are not delivering, that is forcing companies to make people come back in. And then when I look at some of the companies in Houston, on the other hand, a lot of them put a lot of money in upgrading their buildings. So they're trying to get their money back by making some of these people come in and take advantage of these amenities.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, Hattie, the company that we worked for prior to COVID signed a $200 million contract to renovate the building.
Oh, yeah. And then there's another company downtown that did the same thing. They upgraded their building. They're telling their people to come back in at least 3 days a week because they multi-million-dollar upgrade. So they're not getting their bang for their buck. So they say,
You know, and in the retail world, that's why a lot of companies went bankrupt, was because they signed multi-year contracts for lease spaces, and the lease owner said, "You still need to pay me."
Yeah. There was no compassion. There was no empathy. Everybody had to figure out a way to get their money, and the way they went about it sometimes was so shisty and suspect.
Yeah,
agreed.
I did want to bring something up. Kind of, I guess maybe to close out the show. So, I'm a fan of comedy. I think we all are. Earlier this past week, you probably saw the news out of New York that Dave Chappelle's show was canceled because some people were offended by his commentary, and it had a lot of backlash.
Which show?
He had a show in New York at a theater, and the theater company said that we've listened to a small group of people, and they ended up canceling the show. Anyways, it's had a lot of backlash on the company doing that. Yeah, you didn't hear about this?
No, I haven't heard this either.
All I did see, though, that finally, after alienating everybody at Netflix, Monique is finally getting her stand-up. She's going to do a show.
Nice.
For networks, finally. I don't know about all that. But because she got issues. I love her, but she has issues.
All right.
But she's finally getting one.
I just pulled it up. It's not New York, sorry. It's a concert venue in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's been in downtown since I guess 1970. They issued this tweet on June 20th. It says, "We hear you. Tonight's show has been canceled at First Avenue and is moving to the Varsity Theater. See our full statement for more." And so their full statement reads, "The Dave Chappelle show tonight at First Venue has been canceled and is moving to the Varsity Theater. To staff, artists, and our community, we hear you and we are sorry. We know we must hold ourselves to the highest standards, and we know we let you down. We are not just a black box with people in it, and we understand that First Avenue is not just a room, but meaningful beyond our walls. The First Avenue team and you have worked hard to make our venues the safest spaces in the country, and we will continue with that mission. We believe in diverse voices and the freedom of artistic expression, but in honoring that, we lost sight of the impact that this would have. We know there are some who will not agree with the decision. You are welcome to send feedback. If you're a ticket holder, look for an email with information on your tickets transferring the show at the Varsity Theater."
Okay, we get it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this. People take all the fun out of comedy. People are so freaking sensitive.
Yeah. Just
like comedy used to be, you could say whatever. And I don't care what you say. I may not have any friends after this. Now I'm fine with that. But get over yourself. Every single culture is getting all up in their feelings when somebody says, Dave, what I do like about Dave Chappelle, he stays consistent. You can't cancel him. And he's not just because you say you want to, one venue to another. And he understands that. But he's been saying the same thing for years. He has never changed his stance. All of a sudden, the last few years, everybody is so upset, and every culture is so upset about verbiage and words that comedians say, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I'm actually going to drop in a clip here from the Business Communicators. D-Ray and I talked about cancel culture, and he had a line talking about stop canceling comedians. So I think it's probably relevant right now. So I'm going to drop this in to the show.
Stop canceling comedians. The shit is supposed to be funny. It's supposed to touch you and move you in a way that, is like, well, it's a little taboo. You give it a little bit of a side eye. If it made you laugh, ask yourself why it made you laugh. Seek out that self-awareness. Know thyself.
So I thought that was an interesting take from, D-Ray about not canceling comedians. And we've got the Dave Chappelle situation. But the reason why I wanted to bring that up is there's another comedian, Andrew Schultz. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's pretty popular with the millennial Gen Z generation.
Well, that figures.
He definitely pushes the envelope. Nobody is safe if you go in there. I mean, he starts his show by like looking who's at the front and like the front row and just picks people out and starts roasting them.
He's a white D.L. Hughley.
Yeah, basically. So he's got about 500,000 followers on Twitter. He's got about 2 million followers on Instagram. So he had a comedy special that he filmed called Infamous. And I think he actually filmed it a few months ago in Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he had partnered with a streaming service to buy this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what streaming service it was. I'm going to speculate that it was probably Netflix. And Netflix has had some backlash with Dave Chappelle, but they've continued to have him on because of the contracts and everything. So the streaming service, we'll call it Netflix, reached back out to him and said, "Hey, your comedy special is a little too spicy. Can you maybe edit some of the jokes out or cut around it?"
I hope he said no.
He said no.
Good.
And what he did is he actually emptied his bank account and bought the special back from
Good.
from the streaming service.
And let me correct you real quick.
Well,
Netflix.
Hold on. And he put it on his website, selling it for $16 a pop. And all of these other comedians like Joe Rogan, everyone has been sharing it on their social feeds this past week.
Good.
Like,
I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yeah.
No, I would say let me correct you about Dave Chappelle. Netflix doesn't just support him because of the contracts. They support him because it's free speech.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to tell people that they're not doing him a favor. They're getting rich off of him too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to be clear.
I'm going to applaud a whole lot of different things here. That the community gets together and says, this isn't right. This is what needs to happen because it's a work of art. And they support each other. And what popped in my head, what popped in my head immediately was YouTube when they got into the controversy for censoring blurred lines because there was topless women in it. And Justin Timberlake had a music video come out at the same time. And Justin Timberlake came out saying, what's going on here?
Blurred lines.
It's a song.
Robin Thicke.
Oh no, that's not why they. They
no. Trust me.
Yeah.
The song itself, but they made him go through and re-record everything. But Justin Timberlake had a thing out there, and he's like, "You got to judge by the same book. Either I can't be here, or he's got to be back to the same level." And so that's what I said is I'm applauding that the industry giants or giants for this example stick together, and that goes back to the whole topic of this subject about what's in it for we is helping us out. And I truly believe what was said is collectively, I know I'm better with you two, like exponentially.
Oh, we know that too, Thomas.
Oh, we know that. There was no question. I don't even know why you brought
I don't know
that
why
up.
you're suggesting.
Really?
Ball on tee. Yes. Here's the softball. Swing away. Have fun.
You set yourself up for that one.
That's what I'm saying. I put the ball on the tee. I'm glad y'all swung.
Swung for the rafters,
and we didn't miss. Neither one of us. Hattie and I are batting 1,000.
Home run, bro.
But I just want to close with this. I do think it's going to be interesting to see, like, kudos to Andrew Schultz. Like, whether you like his comedy or not, I do think it's fascinating that he actually put up the capital and said, I'm going to do this on my own, even if this does take a financial loss. I think you're going to have other creators, whether it's the comedy space, the music space. Someone like Taylor Swift is already doing this in the music space, like releasing her own albums. Like, people are going to start taking ownership of their own work. And I think they're going to start bypassing some of these like third-party distribution platforms.
Well, people do that now. Jay-Z.
Well, 100%. But I think this is going to become more of the rule,
the norm,
the
norm. Yeah, I agree. But I think it also should be the case too, because you got all these third parties making money off of your catalogs and things like that. I think you should take it up on yourself. And I hope that Andrew Schultz knocks it out the park, makes millions of dollars for what he did, because everybody should do that.
Yeah.
No one monkey stop, no show.
Yeah. I mean, if you just look at his Twitter following and Instagram following, say that only 100,000 people buy it. $1.5 million in revenue.
There's an audience out there for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think it's good to own your own stuff. That's why we have our own LLC. You look at Kate Bush. She had, the song Running Up That Hill in the 1980s. It's now a top 10 song in the world because of Stranger Things. And she's made millions and millions of dollars off of it because she owns everything. She didn't sell it to a label.
Awesome.
40 years later, she gets $14 million over a summer. It's crazy.
You hear these creators, and we've talked NFTs and things like that. I think those are the smartest ones who build in the performance based, how well it goes. I think Tom Cruise is a big one with like Top Gun. Is that some of his pay comes from ticket sales or downloads or whatever it boils down to being?
Yeah,
but I don't know.
A lot of actors are smart enough to do that. They're going to get the gate.
Logan Paul and Jake Paul are big in that space too. Two young creators in their 20s. But anyways, fascinating conversation. It was fun to have David York on the podcast. We really enjoyed it.
Great conversation.
Yeah, definitely scroll down the show notes below and check out his book, buy it, purchase it, follow up, check out his TED Talk. I think it was from 2015, but it's a pretty solid conversation, and maybe we'll look to have him back on the show. But if you want to follow our work, just search Biz Communicator on all the social media platforms. Of course, you can go to our website, thebusinesscommunicators.com, and let us know what you thought of this episode. We definitely touched on some subjects that could get us canceled. Who knows? But
I doubt it. We own our show.
Yeah, but we want to have these conversations, right? Like if you like something, support it. If you like our show, support it. If you don't, that's fine. We want to know what we could do to maybe improve the show, maybe change up the show a little bit. So we've got thick skin. Let us know. But
we really do.
Yeah. Any parting thoughts from you, Hattie, or you, Thomas?
No, I just want to say this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it today. I missed you guys. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah.
My final part is, as we did take a little summer hiatus, and I know we have a few more weeks of summer coming up, enjoy it. Get outside, enjoy it. I would say get outside, enjoy it, unless you're in Texas or the rest of the world right now with heat advisories in the 60s. But take time to reflect. Like, this is the time to pick up a book. This is the time to, watch the bird fly to the tree. Take time to reflect. That's my stance right now. Center on yourself for at least the next couple of weeks, as the fall is going to come here fast and furious, especially for those with kids in school.
And I can't wait for football season. Cannot wait.
All I gotta say is support the cactus.
All right. Well, this has been a fun episode of the Business Communicators, and we really appreciate David York for joining us on this show. And again, support him, support his work and what he's doing as well. But it's been fun. This has been episode 19 of the Business Communicators podcast. My name's Austin Staton. Special thanks to David York for joining us and my co-host, Hattie Horn, Thomas Bain. We'll see you soon.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review.